He slammed his hand on the dinner table and stared at his son in disbelief. "You want to marry a woman I've never heard of after everything I've done for you?" Richard Stone, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, was used to control, used to having the final word. But that night, his son Ethan challenged him with nothing but a name. Nicole. A woman who, to Richard, should have been long buried in the past. He sent a man to follow Ethan, determined to uncover the truth about this mysterious woman. What he found shattered him. It wasn't just some older single mother. It was her. The girl who once confessed her love to him in tears, whom he rejected coldly years ago. The woman he never thought he'd see again. Now fate had thrown them into each other's lives once more. Only this time, his son was in the center of it all. How do you react when your past and your future collide in the most unexpected way? Stay with us until the end, because this isn't just a story about love, but about guilt, redemption, and the second chances we never see coming. Would you forgive someone who once broke your heart? If life gave you just one more chance? When Ethan Caldwell told his father he was planning to get married, Richard Caldwell, the founder of one of the most successful tech conglomerates in the U.S., couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had always seen Ethan as reckless and impulsive, a privileged young man who had never heard the word no. And now, out of the blue, he was talking about marriage. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, the Manhattan skyline stretching behind him. "You're putting me in a corner here," he said slowly, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Just yesterday, I told you about the woman I picked out for you. Brilliant family. Ivy League credentials. Future senator written all over her. And you laughed it off. Now you're engaged. To whom exactly?" Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "Her name is Nicole. I'm meeting her tonight. And I'm going to marry her. Whether you like it or not." Richard nearly dropped his glass. "Nicole. Nicole. Who? Where did you even meet her? Give me an address. I want to meet her myself." But Ethan was already heading toward the elevator. "I'm not giving you her address, Dad. You don't get to interfere this time." Richard called after him, but the elevator doors closed with a sharp ding. Moments later, Ethan's black SUV pulled out of the underground garage and disappeared into the New York night. Still gripping his drink, Richard snapped his fingers and called his personal assistant. "Track him. I want to know everything about this Nicole. Who she is, what she does, and why my son thinks she's worth turning his back on this family." The next day, Richard found himself parked discreetly in an older neighborhood in Brooklyn. His driver stayed quiet as Richard watched from the back seat. Ethan stood outside an old brownstone, speaking to a woman in her mid-30s. She was balancing a heavy grocery bag in one hand and holding the hand of a small boy with the other. Richard narrowed his eyes. This couldn't be her. She was older than Ethan by at least a decade and had a child. He watched Ethan take the grocery bag from her and help her inside. 5 minutes later, Ethan exited the building and drove off. Richard's jaw clenched. What the hell was his son thinking? He stepped out of the car and approached two older women sitting on the stoop. With a charming smile and an easy manner, he asked what floor the woman with the child lived on. They were more than willing to help and even gave him her apartment number. He rang the bell. The door opened, and the world stopped. Standing before him was Nicole Patterson, a name he hadn't heard in over 20 years, but a face he could never forget. Back then, she was just Nikki, the younger sister of Sarah, his high school sweetheart. Nikki had always followed him around like a lost puppy, tagging along when her sister and Richard would sneak out to concerts and lakeside bonfires. But she'd been a kid then, 7 years younger, and he'd barely noticed her. Eventually, Sarah and Richard had split, and he'd gone on to marry Charlotte, Ethan's mother. But Charlotte died tragically in a car crash when Ethan was only 5. Since then, Richard had buried himself in work and raised Ethan alone, keeping his past locked away like a vault. Now that past was standing right in front of him, alive, breathtaking, and holding a little boy's hand. "Nikki," he said, the name catching on his tongue like dust. Her brows shot up. "Richard, what the hell are you doing here?" I didn't know it was you. I didn't know Ethan." He trailed off, lost in the whirl of realization. "You're Nicole? The one he's marrying?" Nicole took a deep breath. "Ethan's your son?" Richard nodded, too stunned to speak. Nicole blinked, then gave a soft, almost ironic laugh. "He's a good man. But I had no idea you were his father." They stood there silent. Time seemed to fold in on itself. He wanted to say something about the past, about how she'd once come to him before his wedding, crying and professing her love. But he dismissed her back then, chalked it up to a teenage crush. And now here she was, with a child, standing on the threshold of a life that included his son. "I should go," he muttered, turning away. "I'm sorry." Nicole watched him walk away without a word. But her eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, followed him until he disappeared down the stairwell. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying her face, the surprise, that child. And then another thought hit him like a freight train. If Nicole had a child, was it Ethan's? Or someone else's? He had to know. And more than that, he needed to talk to her. Not just about Ethan, but about everything that had happened, about her sister, about the time he had refused a loan to her brother-in-law, who had come begging for money to treat their sick infant son. Richard hadn't listened. By the time he understood the gravity of it all, the baby had died. That guilt had never left him. And now, somehow, fate had brought Nicole back into his life. But the question was it too late for redemption? And what would Ethan say when he found out the woman he loved was the same girl his father had once left behind? Richard couldn't stop thinking about her. Every moment since that front door opened, revealing Nicole's face, matured, radiant, worn with life, but stunning in a way that clawed at memory. He had been haunted by the ghost he thought he'd buried long ago. She was no longer the teenage girl pining behind her sister. She was a woman now, and from what he saw, a mother too. But to Ethan, the thought unsettled him. Richard paced the length of his penthouse office in the Caldwell Tower, unable to focus. He had a conference call and 20 minutes of board meeting that afternoon and a dinner with a potential investor. And yet, all he could see was the look in Nicole's eyes, the shock, the bitterness, the echo of something unresolved. A knock snapped him out of it. It was Ethan. Richard hadn't expected him. Not now. "Dad," Ethan said, stepping in, casual as ever but with an edge in his voice. "You met Nicole, didn't you?" Richard's silence was answer enough. Ethan let out a short laugh, half angry, half incredulous. "You had me followed, didn't you? I saw the car yesterday. You couldn't just let me make my own choice." Richard sat down slowly. "You could have told me it was her, Ethan." "Why would I?" Ethan shot back. "Because she's from your past? Because you think that gives you a say." "You don't know everything," Richard said. "And you do." Ethan stepped closer, his tone tightening. "You think just because you built an empire and raised me alone, you get to dictate my life? Nicole is the first person I've ever met who doesn't care about the Caldwell name. She sees me. And I'm not giving that up." There was a pause, long and loaded. Then Richard said quietly, "She has a child, Ethan." "A boy." "I know," Ethan replied. Richard blinked. "I know," Ethan repeated. "And he's not mine. His name is Liam. He's her nephew. Nicole's sister and brother-in-law died in a car crash 2 years ago. She's been raising him since." A weight dropped in Richard's chest. "Why didn't she tell me that?" he murmured. "Because it wasn't your business," Ethan replied, then added. "But you made it your business anyway, didn't you?" Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. Later that week, Ethan brought Nicole to the Caldwell corporate building. Richard was in the middle of preparing for a major international negotiation. Chinese investors, a deal that could shift the trajectory of the company. But his translator had called in sick. Tension crackled in the air. Just as the meeting was about to collapse into awkwardness, someone entered the boardroom. It was Nicole. She was wearing a sleek navy blue suit and her hair tied back. But what stunned Richard most wasn't her transformation. It was the fluency with which she greeted the investors. Her Mandarin was precise, graceful, natural. The room shifted, the atmosphere smoothed. She translated, facilitated, even corrected a cultural faux pas one of Richard's executives nearly made. By the end of the meeting, the investors were laughing, nodding, shaking hands. The deal was saved. Afterwards, back in his office, Richard stood before her. "You speak Chinese. And French. And German. I studied linguistics," she said. "Languages came easy to me." "You work here?" he asked. "I started as a contractor and admin a few months ago," she said. "I didn't know this was your company until last week." Richard chuckled, incredulous. "The universe really knows how to mess with me." Nicole crossed her arms. "Why did you come to my door, Richard? Just to size me up for your son?" "No," he said. "At first, maybe. But then I realized who you were, and I didn't know what to do with that." Nicole studied him carefully. "Then figure it out. Because Ethan loves me. And I'm not going to let your unresolved guilt ruin that." He didn't respond. Days passed, and Richard tried to bury himself in work. But everywhere he turned, something reminded him of the past. A photo of Charlotte. A memory of his late brother-in-law begging for help. the image of the woman he turned away when she needed him most. One evening, Ethan was out, and Richard found himself parked outside Nicole's apartment again. It was dark. The street was quiet. He wasn't even sure why he was there, until he saw Liam, the boy, sitting alone on the stoop, hugging his backpack. "Hey, buddy," Richard said, stepping out of the car. "Everything all right?" Liam looked up, eyes glassy. Aunt Nicole fainted. The ambulance came. They took her. His stomach turned. "Do you have anyone here? Anyone to stay with?" Liam shook his head. Richard didn't hesitate. "Come on, let's go. You'll stay with me." The next 2 weeks changed everything. Liam moved into the guest suite of Richard's penthouse. They played chess, ate pizza, talked about comic books. Richard, for the first time in decades, found himself laughing, feeling. He hadn't expected to bond with the boy, but he did, and it hit him hard. This was the family he never had the courage to pursue. Nicole was recovering in the hospital from stress-induced exhaustion. When she was finally discharged, Richard and Liam were there waiting at the exit. When she saw them, Nicole froze. Richard stepped forward. "He's okay. He stayed with me." Nicole blinked back tears. "Thank you." He reached out. "Nicole, I want to make things right." "I don't know if that's possible," she whispered. "I don't either," he said. "But I'm going to try." That night, as she rested at home and Ethan arrived with groceries and flowers, Richard sat alone in his car outside, staring at the apartment window glowing from within. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a father, and maybe on the edge of something more. "Now let's turn it over to you. What would you do if life gave you a second chance with someone you once hurt deeply?" Nicole stood silently in her kitchen, the tea kettle gently whistling behind her, but her mind was far away. The soft knock at the door startled her, though she already knew who it was. She didn't move for a moment, her hand frozen around the mug. Then slowly she walked to the door and opened it. Richard stood there holding a small bouquet of gardenias, her favorite, though he had no idea how he remembered. "I won't stay long," he said. I wanted to see how you're feeling." "I'm okay," she replied, her voice steady but distant. He hesitated. "You've always been stronger than anyone gave you credit for." Nicole raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond. She motioned him in. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet. Liam was asleep in the next room, and a warm orange glow from the lamp lit her small but cozy living room. Richard sat at the edge of the couch, unsure of where to begin. Everything he wanted to say felt too heavy for words. "I've been thinking," he started, "about everything. About what I missed. About what I ignored. You have every right to hate me, Nicole. I was a coward back then, and maybe even now." She sat across from him, crossing her arms tightly. "Why now, Richard? Why come back into my life just when I was starting to feel whole again?" "Because I was wrong," he said. "And not just about you, about your sister, about RJ, about myself. And I see now what I missed wasn't just about the past. It's about what I almost lost again." Nicole stared at him for a long moment, the silence between them stretching thin. Then she whispered, "You broke me once. I spent years putting myself back together, raising Liam, building a new life, and then suddenly you show up like some story I locked in a box." Richard's throat tightened. "I don't expect you to trust me. But maybe, just maybe, we were given this second chance for a reason." She stood, walked over to the window, and looked out at the dark street below. "I don't know if I believe in second chances, Richard, but I believe in Liam. I believe in Ethan. And somehow, this mess we've all been pulled into, it's turned into something I didn't expect." "What's that?" he asked. "A family," she said quietly. "One I never thought I'd have again." In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. Slowly, cautiously, Nicole accepted a formal position at Caldwell International as head of cultural relations, her linguistic skills now recognized and respected. Liam began attending a new school with the help of a scholarship Ethan personally secured. And Richard? He didn't try to rush anything. He just showed up day after day, a steady presence. Not demanding, not apologizing anymore. Just there. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan and Nicole's wedding took place in a sunlit garden overlooking the Hudson River. It was intimate, elegant, emotional. Liam walked his aunt down the aisle, beaming with pride. Richard stood nearby, watching it all with a quiet reverence. When Nicole and Ethan exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Not because the words were perfect, but because the journey had been so imperfect, so human, so real. After the ceremony, Richard stepped aside, letting the guests mingle. Nicole found him near the edge of the water, his hands in his pockets. "Beautiful day," he murmured. She smiled. Perfect in its own messy way. He turned to her then, his eyes not hiding what they used to. "I've loved 2 women in my life, Nicole. One I never really understood until it was too late. And the other, I'm finally brave enough to face." She didn't say anything at first, but then placed her hand over his. "I'm not asking for forever," she said softly. "But if we start with now, I might be willing." Years passed. Liam grew into a kind, bright young man. Richard and Nicole found their rhythm. Not always perfect, but grounded in something they'd both earned: redemption and the power of love after loss. The Caldwell family name, once synonymous with cold empire building, now meant something more: a story of healing, of broken things mended not with force but with patience. And sometimes, when Richard looked out from his office window, watching the sun set over the city skyline, he still couldn't believe how fate had twisted his life so completely. But he never questioned it again. Because some miracles don't announce themselves. They arrive slowly, quietly, wrapped in second chances. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think of this story? Did it surprise you how things unfolded between Richard, Nicole, and Ethan? Would you have forgiven someone like Richard if you were in Nicole's shoes? If you were Ethan, would you still fight for love even if it meant standing against your family's past? Comment 100 below if this story touched you, and let us know what country you're watching from. And don't forget to share this video so more people can feel the emotions in this powerful journey.